Have you ever felt like the modern world, for all its dazzling scientific breakthroughs and, technological marvels, sometimes feels a little hollow?
Hmm.
Like we've gained incredible knowledge about how things work, but maybe lost a bit of the wonder, the meaning, or even, I don't know, a deeper spiritual connection to the universe around us.
It's a common feeling, definitely, that
Yeah.
sense of flatness.
Exactly. It's a feeling that seems to resonate with a lot of people, and today we're taking a deep dive into exactly that. We're going to explore whether there is, in fact, a profound spiritual dimension to the universe.
And crucially, whether we, as humanity, might have actually philosophized it right out of existence, maybe without even realizing it.
Right. Our mission today is to unpack some truly profound ideas from two brilliant, though very different thinkers, Alfred North Whitehead and Wolfgang Smith.
Two heavyweights, for sure.
Both of them looked back at the history of thought and concluded that centuries ago we took a crucial, perhaps catastrophic, wrong turn.
A fork in the road,
Yeah.
philosophically speaking.
A turn that inadvertently disenchanted our world, stripped it of its inherent vibrancy, its intrinsic meaning, and that sort of sense of the sacred.
Yeah, drain the magic out, you could say.
But here's the really interesting part. They seek to re-enchant it, not by rejecting science, not at all, not by turning our backs on the incredible knowledge we've gained,
No, that's key. They aren't anti-science.
but by completely re-understanding its place, its power, and crucially, its limitations. It's about fitting science into a richer, more complete picture of reality.
And to really grasp the magnitude of the problem Whitehead and Smith are trying to solve, we absolutely have to start with René Descartes. You know, that towering figure from the 17th century.
Can't avoid Descartes if you're talking modern thought, can you?
Not really. His ideas laid the very foundation for how modern science and, well, really much of Western thought came to understand reality itself.
Right. You likely know Descartes for his famous declaration, I think, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum.
The classic line.
But for our deep dive today, what's truly foundational is something he introduced called the Cartesian bifurcation. Now, that sounds like a mouthful, doesn't it?
It does sound a bit academic.
But think of it simply as a massive split. A fundamental divide he carved into how we understood or maybe divided reality itself. He essentially took the universe and conceptually cut it into two distinct, completely separate pieces.
A clean break.
It was a revolutionary idea at the time, and its impact, well, it echoes even today, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Descartes was living in an era of immense scientific discovery, right?
Yeah.
Galileo, Kepler. And he was driven by this desire to establish a firm, undeniable bedrock for objective knowledge, especially for the emerging sciences like physics and astronomy.
He wanted solid ground.
Exactly. Certainty. So to achieve this, he proposed that reality was made up of two distinct kinds of substances. And here's the crucial part. These two substances were, by their very nature, totally separate, mutually exclusive, different rules, different realms.
Okay, so what were these two substances?
First, he posited what he called res extensa. This literally translates to extended stuff, which is essentially what we now largely understand as physical matter.
Extended, meaning it takes up space.
Precisely. For Descartes, the properties of this extended stuff were purely quantitative. We're talking about things you can measure: size, shape, location in space, motion.
Like a billiard ball on a table.
Perfect example. You can measure its diameter, its weight, its exact position, how fast it's rolling. That's res extensa. It was seen as inert, purely mechanical, operating like clockwork. And importantly, devoid of any inner experience, any inherent quality like color or sound or any purpose.
Just stuff.
Just stuff. It just is. And it moves according to strict, predictable mathematical laws. And this very quickly became the exclusive domain of objective science, the stuff that physics could precisely measure, predict, and ultimately control.
Okay. So if res extensa was the measurable, mechanical, objective world, cold, hard facts, basically,
Yeah.
what was on the other side of this philosophical chasm?
On the other side, you had res cogitans, or thinking stuff. This is where our mind, our consciousness, our inner world resided.
The ghost in the machine.
That phrase came later, but yes, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike matter, res cogitans was non-spatial. It didn't take up physical room or have a specific location in the same way. It was private.
Meaning only I know my thoughts.
Exactly. Your thoughts and feelings were uniquely yours. No one else could directly access them. Its defining characteristics were thought, feeling, consciousness, value, everything that makes up our subjective experience of being alive.
So on one hand, we had this cold, hard, measurable, objective world of mechanisms, and on the other, our vibrant, qualitative, deeply personal, and entirely subjective inner world. And the key, as you said, is they were considered completely separate, like oil and water.
Completely separate and distinct, like two different universes, almost. And while this division was incredibly powerful for the development of modern physics, I mean, it gave science a clear, seemingly unencumbered field to study, free from all that messy subjective stuff.
It let physics just focus on the billiard balls.
Right. But both Alfred North Whitehead and Wolfgang Smith argue that elevating this practical methodological tool into a metaphysical fact about reality, basically saying this is how the universe actually is, was, and this is a strong claim they both make in different ways, the single greatest philosophical error of the modern age.
Wow. Not just a useful idea, but a fundamental mistake.
They saw it as much more than just a convenient way of studying the world. It became a declaration of how the world fundamentally is. It became dogma.
And the consequence of that, if you think about it from a human perspective, feeling perspective, it's pretty profound, isn't it? It led to what they describe as a disenchanted world.
Exactly.
It's like we built this incredible scientific edifice, this amazing understanding of mechanics, but in doing so, we might have accidentally drained the magic out of everything, left the building kind of empty.
It's an astute observation. Because think about it. If the material world, res extensa, is truly just a dead, meaningless machine, devoid of any inherent qualities or purpose, then where do all the things we cherish actually live? Color, sound, beauty, the feeling of love, the sense of purpose? Where do they reside?
Well, Descartes put them in the mind, right? In res cogitans.
He did. But if the mind, res cogitans, is entirely separate from the material world, res extensa, then it becomes this isolated, almost impotent ghost in the machine, unable to truly interact with or find inherent meaning in the world outside itself.
So beauty isn't in the sunset, it's only in my head looking at the sunset.
According to the strict Cartesian view, yes. This created a profound sense of alienation, a feeling that our lived experience with all its richness, its color, its sound, its feeling, was somehow less real than the objective, colorless, silent world science described.
That feels deeply wrong, doesn't it?
It does. And this sets up the central problem that both Whitehead and Smith aim to solve. How do we begin to heal this philosophical wound? How do we bring back that sense of a spiritual dimension of inherent meaning to a world that, for many, now feels increasingly hollowed out by this deep-seated separation?
Okay, let's unpack this. How did these two philosophers try to heal this schism and bring back that sense of a spiritual dimension? Let's start with Alfred North Whitehead. He's a fascinating figure.
It really is.
What's so interesting about Whitehead is that he wasn't primarily known as a philosopher dealing in metaphysics at first. He was a towering figure in mathematics, co-authored Principia Mathematica with Bertrand Russell.
A foundational text of modern logic, hugely influential.
Exactly. So this isn't some abstract ivory tower mystic disconnected from rigor. This is a mind rigorously trained in the most precise and objective fields, who later turned his immense intellect to understanding the very fundamental nature of reality.
Which gives his philosophical work a unique kind of grounding, I think. He came to philosophy with a deep respect for science, but also a profound awareness of its limitations. He saw what it couldn't capture.
So what was his main critique? How did he diagnose this Cartesian split problem?
His central critique, the way he diagnosed the fundamental problem we just discussed, is brilliantly encapsulated in one of his most famous concepts, the fallacy of misplaced concreteness.
Okay, that sounds important. Fallacy of misplaced concreteness. What does that mean in plain English?
For our listener, this is absolutely crucial to grasp because it truly cuts to the core of what Whitehead thought went wrong. Simply put, it's like mistaking the map for the territory.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Or, confusing the detailed recipe for the actual delicious meal. Science, in its incredibly powerful and successful pursuit of understanding, took its abstractions, concepts like matter, space, and time, which it treated as these empty, inert containers, and then mistakenly assumed that these abstractions were the concrete, living reality of the world.
That's a really powerful analogy. We use maps to navigate, right? To understand the lay of the land, but we don't live on the map. The map is a representation, a useful simplification, not the messy, vibrant, real world itself.
Precisely. The scientific abstraction, as Whitehead termed it, focuses intensely on what can be measured and quantified. Matter in motion. That's its bread and butter.
The billiard balls again?
Exactly. It deals with particles that have a simple location, a specific mass, a measurable velocity. Now, to achieve this scientific rigor, it intentionally brackets out or deliberately ignores things like color, sound, beauty, purpose, experience itself.
All the interesting stuff.
Well, arguably. It often labels them as subjective or merely secondary qualities. The prevailing scientific view became those things aren't really out there in objective reality. They're just in your head, a product of your brain interpreting wavelengths or vibrations.
A necessary simplification for doing science, maybe?
Whitehead acknowledged it was useful methodologically. It allowed for clear, objective analysis. But the fundamental mistake, the fallacy for Whitehead, was believing that what science left out in its analysis wasn't truly real in the universe, mistaking the simplified model for the whole picture.
So science gave us this incredibly narrow, quantitative view of reality, focusing only on what fits its methods. But Whitehead argues that's not what we actually experience.
Not at all.
It sounds like he's saying science, in its pursuit of precision, accidentally threw out the baby with the bathwater, stripping the world of its inherent richness.
That's exactly it. By bifurcating nature, by splitting reality into only the measurable quantitative stuff and the subjective qualitative experience, science, perhaps unintentionally, presented a mechanistic world that, frankly, no one actually experiences in their daily lives.
Nobody lives in a world of just equations and particles.
Right. The world of our direct lived experience, with its smells, its textures, its vibrant colors, its intrinsic value, its inherent beauty, that world was relegated to a secondary, less real status. It was as if everything beautiful, everything meaningful, everything that evokes emotion was just a trick of our minds, a projection, not something truly out there in the universe.
And that's the disenchantment.
That is the profound disenchantment we spoke of earlier. The universe becomes a mere mechanism, a silent, colorless, scentless, valueless dance of atoms, as Whitehead sometimes put it, and our very deep human connection to it feels fundamentally severed.
Okay. So if Whitehead's diagnosis is that we accidentally stripped the world of its vibrance and meaning by focusing only on scientific abstractions, what's his radical solution? How does he propose to put the color, the feeling, the very aliveness back into the universe? I've heard he completely discarded the notion of static, inert matter altogether. That's a mind-boggling leap for someone steeped in mathematics.
It is a radical leap, and it's truly central to his re-enchanting vision. Whitehead essentially replaces the traditional idea of stuff or enduring things like permanent billiard balls or atoms with a universe composed entirely of dynamic experiential events.
Events, not things.
Events. He calls these fundamental units actual occasions or actual entities.
Okay, so everything is an event. Even something that seems incredibly solid and stable, like this granite table, or something infinitesimally tiny like an electron. That's a completely different way of seeing reality, isn't it?
Absolutely. Utterly different. For Whitehead, there are no truly enduring things in the traditional sense, no static objects that persist through time without change. Instead, they're only processes of becoming, continuous flows of happening.
So the table isn't just sitting there.
Not as a single static thing. It's a complex, incredibly rapidly successive society of actual occasions, each event moment arising and perishing, but maintaining a stable pattern that gives us the impression of solidity.
Wow. Okay. And an electron.
Even an electron, which we commonly picture as a tiny, persistent billiard ball, isn't that for Whitehead. Instead, it's a serially ordered society of momentary events, each event inheriting characteristics from its immediate past and contributing to the emergence of a new present moment, a new event.
So each actual occasion is like a pulse, a momentary happening.
A momentary burst of experience, you could say. It comes into being, achieves its moment of satisfaction or completion, and then immediately perishes as soon as it's completed. But in perishing, it becomes objective data for the next event in the sequence. It's a continuous flowing sequence.
It helps you grasp the fundamentally dynamic, flowing, ever-creating nature of reality, in his view. The universe isn't a collection of nouns, it's a verb. Always happening.
That's a great way to put it. It's fundamentally about process, not static substance.
Okay, so reality is a constant stream of these fleeting actual occasions, but how do they interact? How do they build up a coherent, seemingly stable universe if they're just these momentary flashes? There must be some connection.
That's precisely where his central and truly innovative concept of prehension comes in. This is the heart of his system for how these events relate.
Prehension, another Whitehead term. What's that about?
It's not just about intellectual grasping, like understanding a concept. It means something much deeper. Feeling or taking account of the entire rest of the universe from its own unique momentary perspective.
Feeling the universe, even an electron feels something.
In a rudimentary sense, yes. Think of it like a momentary vibe check of everything around it, but it's more fundamental than that. It's not just intellectual input, but a real basic feeling or grasping of all the objective data from the events that came before it.
So it takes in its environment.
Exactly. Whitehead famously says, prehension is the fusion of subject and object. What he means is that an actual occasion is subjective in how it synthesizes and organizes its own unique experience, how it feels the world from its standpoint. But crucially, it is taking in objective data, real facts, from the settled, actual past world that it's connected to. It's like a tiny, momentary burst of proto-consciousness, maybe, that integrates its entire relevant environment into its own fleeting being.
Now, here's where it really gets fascinating and maybe connects back to Descartes. How does this actual occasion idea, with its prehension, actually heal Descartes' split between mind and matter? If everything is an event that prehends, how did that bring the two seemingly separate realms back together?
This is truly the genius of Whitehead's approach. It's elegant, really. Each actual occasion, no matter how simple or complex, from an event in the life of an electron to a human thought, has two fundamental poles within it. And these poles directly address and, in effect, heal the Cartesian split, rendering it obsolete.
Two poles within each event, what are they?
First, there's the physical pole. This is the actual occasion's prehension of the settled, actual world of the past. It's how it takes in all the objective data, all the influences, all the physical facts from everything that has already happened in the universe up until that micro moment.
So it's connected to the physical past.
Yes. This pole corresponds to what we normally call efficient causation, the push from the past, the way one physical event causally influences the next one in the chain. Think of it as the given aspect of the event, the raw material, the hard facts it has to deal with from its inherited past.
Okay, that sounds like the res extensa side, the physical world side. What's the other pole?
The other pole, and this is where it gets truly revolutionary, is the mental pole.
Mental, in an electron.
In a rudimentary sense, yes. This is the actual occasion's novel, creative response to what it has prehended. Based on all the data, all the feelings it has taken in from the past via its physical pole, it then entertains possibilities, what Whitehead calls eternal objects.
Eternal objects, like Plato's forms.
Sort of analogous, yes. These are the pure potentials, the abstract forms like colors, shapes, mathematical ideas, or even values like beauty or harmony that could be actualized in that moment. They aren't actual things yet, just possibilities. From these possibilities, the actual occasion makes a spontaneous decision guided by its subjective aim. The subjective aim is its inherent internal drive towards self-actualization for that moment, towards achieving a specific kind of satisfaction or intensity of feeling in its own brief existence.
A tiny goal, a purpose.
Exactly. This mental pole is the locus of freedom, novelty, and final causation. The pole of the future, the purpose, the goal it's striving for, however simple, even if it's just for that fleeting moment. It's the source of creativity in the universe.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, even something as simple as a photon of light or the interaction of two atoms isn't just inert matter bouncing around. It has this rudimentary internal feeling of its past physical pole and this tiny spark of decision-making or aiming towards a possible future mental pole.
That's the core idea.
That's truly mind-bending. It implies mind, or at least proto-mind, isn't something that just magically appeared late in evolution with humans or complex animals.
Exactly.
It is fundamental to reality at every level.
You've perfectly grasped the radical implication. It means that even the simplest event has both a physical and a mental aspect, at least in this very basic rudimentary sense. It's not consciousness as we experience it, obviously not self-awareness, but it's a primitive form of experiencing and responding, a flicker of creative engagement with reality inherent in the event itself.
So it dissolves the rigid distinction between mind and matter.
Completely. Because every single bit of reality, every actual occasion embodies both dimensions from the get-go. Mind isn't some weird anomaly that pops out of dead matter after billions of years. It's woven into the very fabric of reality itself right from the start.
Okay, so this process-relational universe, where everything is an experiencing event with a physical and a mental pole, how does this profound shift in thinking re-enchant the world? How does it explicitly make room for spirituality? Because it sounds like it completely redefines what the universe is.
It absolutely is a radical redefinition, and it leads directly, almost inevitably, to a profound re-enchantment, a reclaiming of meaning and value in the cosmos. Well, first, by positing experience or prehension as the ultimate stuff of reality, Whitehead completely dissolves materialism. You see, if the most fundamental components of the universe are not inert, dead particles, but rather dynamic, momentary bursts of experience,
Then the universe isn't dead.
exactly, it's fundamentally alive, or at least experiential. The universe is no longer a dead machine that somehow mysteriously coughed up consciousness as a strange, inexplicable anomaly. Instead, the entire cosmos is fundamentally experiential at its core.
Wow.
Our consciousness, as we know it in complex organisms like ourselves, isn't some strange outlier. It's simply a high-grade form of the feeling present in every event, whether that's an electron, a tree, or a human thought. It's a difference in degree and complexity, not in fundamental kind.
That is a crucial aha moment. It completely flips our common understanding. Consciousness isn't something that arises from matter. Experience is matter, or rather, the very essence of what constitutes reality.
Right. It's like saying the universe isn't just a giant calculator. It's a giant, evolving symphony of feeling, constantly creating itself.
So in this view, the spiritual isn't something separate, an add-on or a magical overlay. It's truly inherent to reality itself, woven into every single moment, every event.
Precisely. And this is where Whitehead introduces his incredibly unique concept of God. Now, it's important to clarify, this isn't the classical, transcendent, all-powerful God often found in traditional theology. It's quite different.
Okay. How does God fit into this process universe?
Whitehead's God is a necessary component of his metaphysical system, always interacting with the universe, not separate from it. He describes God as having two natures working together.
Two natures.
First, there's the primordial nature. Think of God in this aspect as the timeless repository of all possibilities, what Whitehead calls those eternal objects. These are the pure forms, the potentials for beauty, order, intensity, truth, harmony that exist eternally, independent of the actual world.
Like a library of all possible ways things could be.
Kind of, yes. And God, in this primordial aspect, provides each emerging actual occasion, each little event with its initial aim. This initial aim is essentially a divine lure toward the best possible outcome of beauty, intensity, and harmony for that specific moment of experience, given its particular circumstances and its past.
So God offers possibilities, doesn't force them.
Exactly. God acts as a persuasive, not coercive force, offering the ideal possibility, the best way forward, for each event to actualize. This lure for feeling, as Whitehead calls it, is what saves the world from becoming completely chaotic or purely mechanistic. Without this divine persuasion towards value, everything might just fall apart into disorder. There would be no drive towards novelty, complexity, or greater intensity of experience.
So God isn't just watching from afar like a distant clockmaker who set the universe in motion and then left it alone.
Not at all.
Instead, God is deeply involved in every moment of the universe's becoming, gently guiding it, luring it toward beauty and order and richness.
Exactly. Deeply immanent. And then there's God's consequent nature. This is the other side of the coin.
Okay, what's that?
In this aspect, God also prehends the world, just like every other actual occasion does, but God prehends everything. This means God takes into the divine experience every achieved satisfaction, every moment of beauty created, but also every sorrow, every struggle, every bit of pain from all the actual occasions throughout the entire universe, past and present.
God feels what the universe feels.
Yes, God then weaves it into an ever-perfecting whole, constantly integrating the totality of cosmic experience into the divine life. In this sense, God isn't just the distant creator or the initial source of aims, but is also the fellow sufferer who understands, who is enriched by the world's experiences, both good and bad, and who perpetually integrates them into a fuller, more perfect divine being. It's a relationship of mutual becoming. God affects the world and the world affects God.
That's really different. It's known as panentheism, right? Not pantheism, God is the world, but panentheism, the world is in God and God is in the world.
Precisely. The universe is within God and God is within the universe, mutually influencing and co-creating. So for Whitehead, the spiritual becomes the very dimension of value, purpose, and creative advance, lured into being by a divine principle of concretion and order. It's not a separate realm up there somewhere. It's the very driving force and integrating principle of the cosmos itself, making the universe a constantly evolving, living, feeling organism.
Wow. That's a truly revolutionary way to look at God and the universe, especially coming from a mathematician. It certainly re-injects a sense of aliveness and purpose into everything. It feels, well, enchanted again.
That's the goal.
Now, let's pivot to another brilliant mind who tackles this same foundational problem of disenchantment, but from a very different angle. Wolfgang Smith.
Yes, Smith offers a fascinating contrast.
He's also a physicist and mathematician like Whitehead, which is interesting in itself, but he approaches this from what's called a traditionalist or perennialist school of thought. So he's looking back at older, perhaps more classical, and even ancient ideas to solve this very modern problem of the split.
That's right. Smith's approach is indeed quite distinct from Whitehead's, rooted in a philosophical tradition that emphasizes timeless perennial truths found across various spiritual and philosophical systems throughout history. Think Plato, Aristotle, Aquinas, Vedanta. He believes modernity lost touch with something essential that these traditions understood.
So how does he diagnose the Cartesian error, the source of the disenchantment?
His diagnosis hinges on what he calls a crucial distinction between the corporeal world and the physical world. He argues that the modern error, the one that cut us off from deeper meaning, is precisely to conflate the two, to mistakenly treat them as if they are the exact same thing, or maybe worse, to think the corporeal is just a weird side effect of the physical.
Okay, corporeal world versus physical world. For a general listener, that sounds like a subtle but maybe extremely important distinction. What's the practical difference there? What does he mean?
It is subtle, but it's the absolute key that unlocks his entire philosophy. The corporeal world is the world of our direct, immediate sensory experience. This is the world of qualities.
What we see, hear, touch.
Exactly. It contains colors, sounds, textures, smells, tastes, and importantly, holistic forms, everything we perceive with our five senses. Think of a vivid red rose you see in a garden, the distinct, resonant sound of a bell, or the rough, tactile feeling of tree bark against your hand. For Smith, this corporeal world is fully real and objective.
Objective. So the redness isn't just in my head.
Not according to Smith. It's not just a subjective illusion generated by our minds. When you see the redness of a rose, that redness is really there in the rose as a perceived object, not just a mental projection unique to your brain. It is part of the objective reality of the rose as a whole corporeal thing.
Okay, so the corporeal world is our everyday qualitative world, the world as we actually experience it, full of richness. What then is the physical world for Smith, if it's different from that?
The physical world is the quantitative abstraction studied by physics. This is the world of particles, fields, wave functions, energy, momentum, all the measurable properties that physics investigates. Things like mass, velocity, charge, spin.
The stuff Descartes called res extensa.
Very similar, yes. Smith argues this physical world is not the full object, but a quantitative residue. It is quite literally what remains of the corporeal object once all its qualities have been stripped away, for the purpose of measurement and mathematical analysis.
So physics looks underneath the qualities.
It looks at the quantitative basis, yes. Physics measures wavelengths and frequencies of light, but it doesn't measure redness directly as a quality. Physics describes how a bell vibrates, but it doesn't describe the bellness or the aesthetic quality of its sound. For Smith, the Cartesian bifurcation, the great error, was the declaration that only this physical residue is real.
Only the numbers.
And the entire corporeal world with all its colors, sounds, and textures is merely a projection of the mind. This is precisely where the world became disenchanted for Smith, by asserting that the qualitative richness of our experience was not objectively real, but just a mental construct floating above a purely quantitative base.
So, for Smith, the profound error of Descartes wasn't just splitting reality, but saying that only the physical half, measurable half, was truly real. And everything we actually see, hear, and feel, all the vibrant colors, the rich sounds, the complex textures, is just something happening in our heads.
That's the core of his critique.
So that means the breathtaking beauty of a sunset really isn't out there in the world. It's just my brain making it up based on wavelengths.
That's precisely the implication of the purely physicalist view that Smith rejects. He confirms that the error was declaring that only the physical residue is real, and the entire corporeal world is a projection of the mind. This effectively banished quality, meaning, and inherent value from objective reality, confining them solely to the subjective, private realm of the mind.
And once that happens,
once the world is reduced to mere quantities and inert particles, the universe ceases to be a meaningful cosmos, an ordered, beautiful whole, and becomes just a collection of dead matter, a chaos of particles.
Okay, so if that's the diagnosis that we flatten reality by denying the objective reality of the qualitative corporeal world, how does Smith's solution try to bring back that full qualitative, meaningful world? He wants to reestablish the ontological hierarchy that modern science flattened, right? What exactly does that mean, ontological hierarchy? Sounds layered.
It's a powerful concept, and yes, layered is a good way to think about it. It means that reality isn't just one flat level of undifferentiated particles, as modern materialism often suggests. Instead, it has different interconnected levels, like a multi-storied building. Each level possesses its own kind of reality and its own principles of operation, and crucially, the higher levels inform the lower ones.
Okay, so how does that apply to something real? Like you use the tomato example.
Right. Let's take a red tomato as a tangible example.
Yeah.
For Smith, this corporeal object, the tomato you see and can eat, is not just physical. It's not just atoms and molecules. It's a synthesis of a physical substrate. It's atoms, it's molecules, the measurable stuff that physics studies, and an intelligible form.
Intelligible form. Like Whitehead's eternal objects again. Or Plato.
Very much in the Platonic and Aristotelian tradition, yes. This intelligible form is the essence or whatness of the tomato, its specific tomato-ness, encompassing its typical shape, its redness as a quality, its identity as a tomato. This form, for Smith, is not physical in the way matter is. It exists in a higher, non-physical realm, a realm of pure ideas or essences. It's what makes the matter be a tomato instead of just a random collection of atoms.
So the form organizes the matter.
Exactly. And here's another critical departure from common understanding, especially in how we think about perception. This corporeal object, the synthesis of matter and form, is actualized in the act of perception.
Wait, I make the tomato real by looking at it. That sounds very subjective.
It's subtle. Smith argues that perception is not a passive reception of data, like a camera simply recording light wavelengths hitting a sensor. Instead, he argues, drawing on quantum physics interpretations as well, that perception is an ontological act that collapses the wave function and brings the corporeal object into being.
Collapses the wave function, like in quantum mechanics.
Precisely. Before perception, the physical substrate exists more like a field of potentialities, described by the wave function. Your act of seeing the tomato with its vivid redness and roundness isn't just your brain interpreting pre-existing data passively. It's a co-creative act. It's the interaction between your consciousness, which connects to the form, and the physical potential that actualizes the full qualitative tomato, the corporeal object, into existence in that very moment. It brings the form and the matter together into a concrete thing.
That's truly fascinating. So the physical stuff, the potential, is there, described by physics, but it takes this higher non-physical form, the idea of tomato and our active participation through perception, to make it a real tomato in all its qualitative glory in our experience.
That's Smith's picture. The physical provides the potential, the form provides the whatness, and perception provides the actuality of the corporeal object.
Okay. And then you mentioned vertical causation. This sounds like another really powerful concept for how these different levels of reality, the physical, the formal, the perceptual, interact.
It absolutely is. It's central to his hierarchical model. Smith introduces this concept to explain how these distinct levels of reality influence each other. He contrasts it sharply with what he calls horizontal causation.
Horizontal causation is?
That's what physics typically studies.
Yeah.
One event causing another in time, like one billiard ball hitting another, making it move across the table. It's a chain of cause and effect within the same physical plane, unfolding sequentially through time.
Got it. So what's vertical?
Vertical causation, on the other hand, is the simultaneous causation of a lower level of reality by a higher one. It's not about things happening after each other in a temporal sequence, but about higher levels of reality informing, organizing, and constituting lower ones, all at the same time, instantly.
Simultaneously. Can you give us an example to make that concept of simultaneous vertical causation really clear for us? It sounds complex, but fundamental to his idea.
Certainly. Let's go back to our red tomato again. The intelligible form of tomato. Its essential tomato-ness, its specific shape blueprint, its qualitative redness potential, its very identity doesn't exist in the physical realm of particles and fields. It exists in a higher, non-physical, intelligible realm.
Okay.
Through vertical causation, this intelligible form descends, you might say, and informs and actualizes the physical matter into a corporeal tomato. It simultaneously organizes the underlying physical substrate into the specific pattern and qualities of a tomato.
It's like the software running the hardware. The software isn't in the transistors, but it makes them do something meaningful instantly.
That's a decent modern analogy. Or think of the architectural blueprint for a house, the form. It simultaneously causes the bricks and mortar, the physical matter, to be arranged as the actual house, the corporeal object you can walk into. The blueprint isn't in the bricks themselves, but it's the higher formal cause that give them their specific structure and purpose right now. Without the blueprint actively informing them, they'd just be a pile.
Okay, that makes sense. And the multi-storied building analogy you mentioned in our source material seems really helpful here too. It's like physics studies only the basement, the raw materials, the particles and forces, the quantitative stuff.
Right, the foundation.
But the ground floor is the corporeal world of things we actually see and touch, like the full actual building with all its specific design and qualities, the tomato we eat.
The world of our experience.
And above that, in Smith's view, are these intelligible realms where the forms, the blueprints, exist, and ultimately perhaps spiritual realms that give the basement structure, meaning, and purpose. It completely reframes how science fits into the bigger picture, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. That multi-storied building analogy is perfect for understanding Smith's ontological hierarchy. Physics gives us incredibly valuable knowledge about the foundational level, the basement. It tells us how the fundamental building blocks behave, the laws they follow. It's essential.
We need the basement.
We definitely need the basement. But to truly understand the whole building, its purpose, its design, its beauty, its very existence as a house, and not just a pile of bricks, you need to look at the higher floors, the realms of intelligible forms, and perhaps even beyond that. Without those higher levels providing the plan and the purpose through vertical causation, the basement remains just a chaotic collection of parts, ultimately inexplicable on its own terms.
So how does this hierarchical view, this multi-storied understanding of reality, bring meaning and transcendence back into the universe? How does it explicitly make room for a spiritual dimension? It sounds like a total game changer for anyone who feels that modern science, or rather materialism, has removed any sense of the sacred.
It does so in a couple of truly profound ways, directly addressing that disenchantment. First, by restoring the reality of the corporeal world of qualities, Smith restores a world that can be symbolic.
Symbolic? How so?
When the color red is not just a wavelength or a subjective brain state, but its qualitative reality is recognized as objectively real, as part of the corporeal object and inherent to the world, then that redness can carry the meaning of love, danger, or life. It's not just data, it's a quality with resonance. Suddenly, the universe in this view becomes a cosmos, an ordered, beautiful, and inherently meaningful whole, rather than just a chaos of particles.
Things mean things again.
Yes, this means that the world around us, with all its sights and sounds and forms, can once again be seen as an icon or theophany, a manifestation or a showing forth of higher realities. It carries deeper significance than just its material composition. Everything in the natural world, from a sunset to a flower to a mountain range, can point to something beyond itself, something intelligible, something perhaps even sacred.
So the world isn't just inert matter, it's also like a living language, maybe. A vast set of symbols pointing to something more, something transcendent. It's a universe that speaks to us if we learn how to read it.
Precisely. That's a very traditional way of seeing the cosmos, which Smith revitalizes. And this leads directly to the second major point. Smith's model of vertical causation explicitly posits that the physical world is insufficient to explain itself.
It can't pull itself up by its own bootstraps.
Essentially, yes. The raw particles and forces alone, operating only under horizontal causation, cannot explain why they arrange themselves into a complex, organized, qualitatively rich being like a tomato, let alone a living organism or a conscious human being. The physical world fundamentally requires a higher non-physical principle to give it form and existence. The blueprint has to come from somewhere else.
And that opens the door?
This directly opens the door to the vertical axis of reality,
Yeah.
the higher realms that are essential for the physical world to be what it is and to be intelligible to us. And Smith explicitly names these higher levels, drawing directly from classical and religious traditions. He talks about the soul or psyche, the intellect or nous, the realm of forms, and ultimately the divine or theos at the apex.
So he's bringing back concepts from Plato, Aristotle, Neoplatonism.
Exactly. It's a profound revalidation of ancient and medieval wisdom within a framework that acknowledges modern physics. He's showing how these realms are not separate superstitions to be discarded, but are perhaps necessary for a complete understanding of reality, including the reality physics studies.
And it sounds like this view also completely changes the perceived conflict between science and religion. It doesn't reject science at all, but rather gives it a proper, maybe even more honored place.
Not at all. No rejection. Smith does not reject science. In fact, he honors it deeply by defining its proper domain. He emphasizes repeatedly that physics gives us powerful knowledge about the quantitative substructure of reality. It tells us how the basement works with incredible precision, allowing us to build amazing technologies.
But it stays in the basement.
But, he argues, physics is metaphysically incompetent to speak about the whole of reality. It simply isn't equipped by its own methods to talk about the intelligible forms, the inherent qualities of the corporeal world, or the higher realms of vertical causation that structure everything.
So science and spirituality aren't fighting over the same territory.
Exactly. This, for Smith, resolves the science-religion conflict by showing they operate on different, non-competing levels of the same hierarchy. Science tells us how the physical world operates at its quantitative level. Metaphysics and spirituality, drawing on the higher levels, explain why it is there, what its ultimate meaning and source are, and how it is organized by higher principles. They're not contradictory, they're profoundly complementary, each offering a vital piece of the overall puzzle of existence.
That's truly fascinating how they both identify the same core problem, this modern disenchantment, this feeling of a universe stripped of meaning by that Cartesian cut, but then offer such distinct yet equally compelling paths back, or maybe forward to a new synthesis.
Forward to a reintegration, perhaps.
Let's bring these two brilliant minds together for a moment, side by side. Really highlight their unique contributions, maybe where they differ most starkly, but also where their visions align in their ultimate goal of healing that split.
Absolutely. It's a valuable comparison. While their projects are distinct in their specific philosophical mechanics, and the traditions they draw upon, Whitehead being very process-oriented and modern, Smith very hierarchical and traditional, their shared goal of re-enchanting the universe and healing that Cartesian split is undeniable and deeply powerful.
So, where do they fundamentally differ in diagnosing the problem?
Okay, if we look at their primary error diagnosis, Whitehead focuses more broadly on the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, essentially confusing the abstract scientific map for the concrete experiential territory and the very act of bifurcation itself as the core issue.
Splitting was the problem.
For Smith, the specific error is narrower, but maybe deeper in its implications. It's conflating the physical, the quantitative abstraction studied by physics, with the corporeal, the qualitative, lived reality of our senses. Denying the reality of the corporeal, both, however, agree there was a fundamental consequential error in how modernity came to define what's real.
And their metaphysical styles, as you said, are quite different too, aren't they? Process versus tradition.
That's right. Whitehead's process philosophy is fundamentally dynamic, radically new in its construction, focusing on the constant becoming of events. It's a bold, modern metaphysics attempting to build a comprehensive new framework from the ground up, integrating modern science deeply.
While
Smith's traditionalism perennialism is hierarchical, static in its structure of levels, though dynamic within levels, and aims at reviving classical, Platonic, Aristotelian, and scholastic ideas. He sees them as timeless, lost truths that need to be reintroduced into modern thought to correct its trajectory.
And their core concepts reflect this difference. Actual occasion versus corporeal object.
Exactly. Whitehead's foundational unit of reality is the actual occasion, that momentary drop of experience with both a physical and a mental pole, always in process, always becoming. Smith's foundational unit for our experience of reality is the corporeal object, a stable synthesis of a physical base, potential, and an intelligible form, actuality, brought into being through perception and vertical causation.
And their views on causality seem quite distinct too. Whitehead's efficient and final causes versus Smith's horizontal and vertical.
Yes, Whitehead uses efficient causation, the push from the past, connecting events horizontally in time, and final causation, the lure of a goal or subjective aim within the event itself, pulling it forward. Smith, as we discussed, uses horizontal causation, what physics studies, the sequential event-to-event chain, and vertical causation, the simultaneous informing influence from a higher realm onto a lower one, different ways of thinking about how things happen and relate.
And finally, how do their visions of the spiritual dimension itself diverge or converge? Because that's what we started with the re-enchantment, finding that spiritual dimension again.
This is maybe the most striking contrast. For Whitehead, the spiritual is profoundly immanent and processive. His concept of God is a persuasive lure for value and order that works within the cosmic process itself, guiding its evolution towards greater beauty and intensity. It's that panentheistic vision, God and the universe deeply interwoven, mutually influencing and co-creating. The spiritual is the inherent drive towards greater complexity, intensity, and harmony within the evolving cosmos itself. It's an unfolding, dynamic spirituality found in the becoming.
Whereas Smith's vision is?
Smith's view of the spiritual is transcendent and hierarchical. The physical world for him is an icon or manifestation of higher spiritual realities, an expression of forms that exist in a realm beyond the physical. His view aligns more closely with classical theism or Neoplatonism, where the divine exists at the apex of a multi-leveled reality, causally informing and sustaining the lower levels through vertical causation. For Smith, the spiritual is found primarily by looking up the vertical axis of reality, seeing the physical as a reflection, a symbol, or an emanation of something greater, higher, and more profound.
It's truly fascinating. Both identify the same core problem, that profound sense of disenchantment stemming from the Cartesian split in our modern world, but then offer such distinct yet equally compelling and equally deep paths to a solution. It's like two different master keys unlocking the same complex door back to a meaningful cosmos.
Indeed, different keys, different mechanisms, but aiming for the same result. And what both Whitehead and Smith achieve, I think, is monumental. They diagnose the Cartesian bifurcation, that deep split in our understanding of reality, as the true root of modern alienation and disenchantment.
They put their finger right on it.
They do. And they fundamentally demonstrate that the alleged conflict between a scientific worldview and a spiritual one is not necessary. It's not baked into the structure of reality.
It's a choice we made. Or a mistake.
Exactly. This perceived conflict, they argue convincingly, is not an inherent truth about reality itself, but rather the product of a philosophical mistake, mistaking the map for the territory, as Whitehead put it, or mistaking the physical residue for the whole corporeal object, as Smith might say, mistaking the abstraction for the concrete reality.
And each offers a unique, powerful way to heal that split and put the magic, the meaning back into the world. Whitehead, in a sense, heals the bifurcation horizontally, wouldn't you say, by infusing every single momentary event of the cosmic process, from the tiniest electron to the grandest galaxy, with an element of experience, creativity, and a lure toward value.
Yes, that's a good way to characterize it.
He gives us a living, breathing, evolving universe where the spiritual is the engine of creative advance, not some separate, distant realm, but the very force driving existence forward from within.
Beautifully put. While Smith heals the bifurcation vertically by restoring the lost dimensions, the higher floors of reality, he shows that the physical world, the one we measure with our instruments, is merely the foundation of a multi-leveled cosmos.
The basement isn't the whole house.
Exactly. This physical foundation points upward to the qualitative corporeal world, then to the intelligible realm of forms, and ultimately to the divine. He reminds us that even a simple object like a red tomato is not just a collection of particles, but a beautiful expression of a higher informing form brought into reality through perception.
So wrapping this up, their combined work powerfully suggests something quite profound.
It really does. Together, their work shows us that a post-Cartesian science, a science that moves beyond that initial split, need not be materialistic or devoid of meaning. By correcting what they see as the foundational error of the bifurcation, they reintegrate mind and matter, quality and quantity, value and fact, in their distinct ways.
And in doing so,
They don't just create a mere possibility for a spiritual dimension, like it's an optional add-on. They demonstrate that a complete and coherent understanding of reality, even one that fully incorporates the powerful findings of modern science, points directly, and perhaps even necessarily, toward its existence. The spiritual isn't just possible, it might be essential for reality to be the way it is.
So what does all of this mean for you, our listener, maybe sitting there listening, thinking about your own experience of the world? It means that the world you perceive every single day, with its vibrant colors, its intricate sounds, its delicious tastes, and its inherent meaning and beauty, that world is not just a subjective illusion conjured up entirely by your brain.
It has objective roots in reality itself in different ways for both thinkers.
It means there might be so much more to reality than what can be measured or quantified by scientific instruments alone. The very separation of mind and matter, of spirit and science, which has defined so much of our modern thought and perhaps caused much of our modern alienation, well, it might actually be a profound misunderstanding, not an inherent truth about the universe itself.
Indeed. And that leads to a final thought, perhaps a provocative question for you to ponder. If the universe is indeed fundamentally experiential at every level, as Whitehead suggests, constantly aiming towards value, or if it is a multi-leveled hierarchy where every object holds both a physical base and something akin to a mental or formal aspect, giving it meaning, as Smith proposes, what new responsibilities or opportunities does that awaken in our own way of engaging with the world around us?
That's a great question.
Does it change how you appreciate a piece of art, or a natural landscape, or even just a simple tomato? Does it change how you interact with another person, knowing that there might be an inherent, deeper, perhaps even sacred reality woven into the fabric of everything and everyone around you. How does that shift our perspective, our actions?
We've taken a deep dive into some truly mind-expanding ideas today. Ideas that really challenge centuries of thinking and invite us to see the world and our place in it completely anew. We hope this exploration gives you much to consider and perhaps even changes how you experience that next sunset.
Seeing it not just as wavelengths of light stimulating your retina.
But as a vibrant, meaningful event, perhaps.
Mhm.
A living part of an inherently enchanted, deeply interconnected, and maybe even spiritual universe. Lots to think about.